All right, guys, we're back on the Kevin and Fred show, and I am rejoined by my friend Chris Heller. Chris, how's it going, man?
It's going great. How
Uh,
come, hey, how come every time I'm on the Kevin and Fred show, it's only Kevin?
Uh, I try to keep Fred working. Somebody has to do it. I record the podcast. Fred does everything else. It's basically
Oh,
our division of labor. And it's funny you say that because he and I just recorded a couple of podcasts together where we talked about business partnerships. And so I was laughing like you're finally on the podcast. This is pretty amazing. And then like so that's come up before. So like maybe I warmed him up a little bit. He might actually record some podcasts now. I don't know. We'll see.
got it.
As long as he doesn't quit his day job, then and it doesn't get in the way of that, I'll allow him to be a bigger part of the podcast. But
Yeah, that'd be something if you had to come out of retirement and
right,
go for
no kidding. All right, man. So Chris, you and I, gosh, I feel like we could probably talk for hours and hours on end. And what I want to focus though this conversation on today for the podcast, anyways, is in regard to I want to talk about the industry. I think when you and I last spoke, it was still a couple of years. It was not quite 2 years ago, but it also wasn't like in the last 6 months. So curious what you're seeing industry wise, kind of some of the things that you're going, and then really the big thing I want to talk about today is the book, and just kind of talk about that. But let's do this if we could. Let's start with the real estate industry as a whole. Give me your take on here. You and I are recording this. It's literally April 1st, 2022. This will, I don't know, air sometime probably in May is my guess. So the writing's kind of on the wall for this year, on the, if you will, or at least, we're through the first quarter now. What's going on? Like, what do you see happening? And if you dare, what do you see kind of happening maybe in the near term future as well in the industry, just kind of from a national perspective?
So it's easier for me if I answer that from a couple different perspectives.
Okay.
One is one from like a real estate agent's perspective. So from an agent, and I still have my team in San Diego that's actively selling. In fact, the text message just popped up from my listing specialist. And from an agent's perspective, like we are pretty much like we were last year, right? There's inventory constraints, there is still good demand, and properties are still appreciating. What's different from last year is affordability is now becoming an issue. And that's a combination of, prices can only go so high before people go, I can't afford it. And then you add, interest rates that have gone up pretty fast and historically not that high, but compared to where they were, it's been a pretty good jump. So that typically is the beginning of when things start to slow down, right? So prices go up in relationship to supply and demand. On the supply side, I don't think we're going to see a lot of changes quickly or significantly. On the demand side, I think we're going to start to see demand start to wane. And when that happens, that then has an effect on supply because you'll have properties that don't sell or don't sell as fast. So they start to accumulate more on the market. As more properties accumulate, more competition, for the amount of buyers that are out there. Now, the good news is there's still strong demand, pretty pent up demand. So I don't think we're going to see like this crest, but it's always fun when you do podcasts and record things and you find out 6 months later you were like completely wrong or you were right. But I think the second half of the year in certain markets we will see things start to slow down. We had a record number of transactions last year. So for the active agents and the active teams, it was like it was had its challenges, but also was awesome because there's a lot of properties selling.
Yeah.
I think we'll probably end up with fewer homes sell this year than we did last year, but not significantly. I mean, maybe it's 10%, could be 20% less, but still 20% less of 6.6 million is still a strong year as far as the number of properties sold. So, agents have been faced and will continue to be faced with more and more challenges. And those challenges come in the form of more agents, fewer sales, downward pressure on commissions, um, uh, more companies coming in contact with buyers and sellers before the agents do. And then, so then the question has been for agents, so what do you do? What do you do to combat all that? Well, look at you don't fight those platforms and those companies out there, you leverage them. You go, okay, how can I get involved? How can I get business, from these companies? The consumers being offered more options than they've ever been before. Like there's so many different ways as a seller I could sell my property now. There's so many different ways I could buy a property, via with a power buyer or a cash buyer or buy before you sell and all those things. Consumers are going to keep getting all those offers. Good agents are going to be the ones that are delivering those offers. And if they do, then they'll use that to create opportunities for themselves. So that's like industry stuff from an agent's perspective. From as a chief real estate officer at Ojo Labs, as an advisor to several startups, an investor in startups, and then, a friend to most of the CEOs of the big companies in our industry, I look at things from that perspective and say, okay, this is going to be an interesting year. There's going to be a lot of companies that were doing really well and had big valuations that are going to struggle. And that's how they handle those challenges and those struggles will be super interesting. There's other companies that have been trying to do things, trying to raise money, trying to go public, and that's likely to be pushed off. We have the company we were both with for a long time, Keller Williams. I would say very little chance they go public in 2022. It'll be 2023 and probably the middle or the second half of 2023. And then if I'm them, I'm definitely concerned about where the market will be by then. And I'm not talking about necessarily the real estate market, but the capital markets and the economy and everything else. So we'll see. Some companies got what they needed just in time and got out just in time, and others will be dealing with strong headwinds. There's and then there's other companies that have a lot of momentum, and as long as the leadership of those companies keep making the right decisions or don't make wrong decisions, they have a big opportunity to take advantage of the headwinds that other companies will be dealing with.
It's funny you say that because I think there are, there's these different stages for some of these companies where it's needed that the leadership makes good, if not great decisions. And then there's other ones where they can just not make bad decisions and they're going to be okay through whatever the next wave looks like or what this next couple of years looks like. At least that's kind of been my observation maybe, and kind of my 2 cents for what it's worth, all 2 cents, in kind of just taking a look at just different companies and models and things that are going on in the industry. For sure, I think there's definitely some that are going to be able to, like, they're really going to have to do well. Like, they're going to have to make solid decisions and just kind of keep um for, to use like a football analogy, like keep moving the ball down the field, right?
Yeah.
And there's others like they can, as long as they play really good defense and don't give up anything crazy, they're also going to be okay.
Yeah. It's also too, when the markets change, or there's different dynamics, it's also interesting to see how different leaders respond.
Yeah.
Some companies you'll see, they'll pull back, and others will go, wait, this is when we need to step on the gas. And I don't know. Personally, I've always been of the mindset that the best defense is a strong offense. So I won't. When others are retreating, I rather attack.
Yeah, that seems to be yeah, that's a good strategy for sure. I think it's funny you mentioned kind of like the capital markets. Like, I know I've noticed a few companies, some massive layoffs, and kind of, I think you've even seen some companies with like down rounds where the valuations went down for the next raise. And a lot of times those things kind of come together because one is dependent upon the other. to even get the money. So I think that's been interesting and telling for sure, is to go, okay, there's certain companies out here that were having no problem raising money before, and they go to raise another round, and now it's like, you know what, we'll give you a little bit of money, but at a lower valuation, and oh, you got to lay this number of people off, or this percentage of people off. So anytime I see that, that's interesting, because it feels like the money on that side of the universe has just been so free flowing for so long.
Yeah, that you're absolutely right. And then the other thing too that's happened is you have some companies who did raise a ton of money with big valuations, and if they had to do it again right now, they wouldn't get those types of valuations, and which puts extra pressure on them to say, okay, we got to make what we got work, and we got to get to where we need to go to,
Yep.
because if we need to raise again, it may not be at the valuation that we did it at. So, and that's never a fun option.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure for sure. Well, let's shift gears for a minute. So, um, man, so for the reader that doesn't, or the listener that doesn't know yet, and hopefully soon to be reader, you published your first book, man, Dominant Thoughts, and things grow where our minds go. So tell me first a little bit, what's the genesis of this project for you? What, and I gotta know, man, why now? Like you're busy, dude. You got a lot of things going on. So tell me about where the book idea came from, and then I'd love to know why write it now.
And by the way, I got my first copy yesterday. So this is like holding the real thing for the first time,
Very
uh,
cool.
less than 24 hours. Um, so, well, the genesis was, yeah, I'm sure a lot of people have the thoughts sometimes of writing a book. It'd be cool to write a book, or if I wrote a book, this is what I'd write it about. And I've had that thought over the years, but like you said, I'm busy, and it's nothing I've slowed down to do. And I've never done it before, right? So you don't know how to do it or what to do or those type of things. So I was about a year ago, I was on a podcast, and the host there was three of us, three guests on the podcast. And and I hadn't met the other two. I had heard of one of them. His name was Greg Reed, and I'd heard him because he was a speaker and an author, and he was from was in San Diego, but I didn't know him. So, anyways, it was a great conversation. Like I listened to that podcast not too long ago. I was like, this was an awesome conversation, and just like knowledge filled nuggets. And anyways, near the end of the podcast, the host said, "Hey, Chris, when are you going to write a book?" And I said, "Yeah, I've thought about it, but I don't know." And I'd have to pick Greg's brain because he's written a bunch of books and I haven't. But I don't know. Nothing's planned. So 2 days later, Greg calls me and says, "Hey, it was fun doing the podcast with you, and I I've been sitting on a title of a book. I already have the URL, and I think with what you have, it would be a fun project to do." He goes, like I said, I got the title, the URL, I have all the contacts and can tell you how to do it, but you got to come up with the content. He goes, "Do you think you have the content?" I said, "Yeah, I have the content. I've thought through things many times." So that was the genesis of it. So that was like a year ago. It's a 118 page book. Like it's 12, 10 page chapters or 9 page chapters. And it we thought 90 days to knock it out and be there. And then the reality sets in, right? It's like, oh, I need to get to it. I can't, I'm too busy, and got stretched out by a year. But I was determined not to have it go past the year. So on December 30th of 2021, I finished the last of it. And it helped too that I had a couple of weeks off work at that time, so power through and get it done. And then we were just gonna self-publish it. And he said, "Hey, I have a book agent. We might as well talk to him and see if any of the big publishers want it." So we contacted that guy who's pretty well known in the industry, in the book industry, and sent him the draft. And he emailed me back like the next day and said, "Hey, I'd like to publish it. I have we do also do publishing." And so it's like, all right, well, okay, I'm skipping the self-publishing route and going going straight to publishing. And so Greg has been Greg is awesome. He is the one of the most dynamic, highest energy people you'll ever meet. And he really knows, I think he's authored or co-authored like 30, 40 books.
Oh, wow.
And so he really knows the stuff. So he has the great connections have been just helping, like the guy that did the cover. Like this was like, I wouldn't have known where to how. And this was like the guy's like first attempt, I think, on the cover. And we said, I love it. That's it. Um, and then we have the dominantthoughts.com website. And I look at it, it's like, this is awesome. And he had the guy that has built other book websites for him. And so it's been a great partnership.
That's awesome. So when it came to like actually writing and kind of creating the content, you're part of the deal there. What was this? Was this kind of did you have the formulation, I guess, already in your head? Was this something you thought about for a
Here,
while and this was happened
here,
to be a way to get it out?
here's what I had. So we decided from day one it was going to be a story, a parable. So it's a business parable. And that really resonated with me because when I was younger and in my 20s, some of the most to this day, some of the most impactful books that I read were those type of books, like The Richest Man in Babylon,
Yeah.
Og Mandino is the greatest salesman in the world, those type of books. And then later, the Who Moved My Cheese and My Iceberg's Melting and all those type books. So that was going to be the format. He had like the opening scene in his head. He goes, here's the opening scene. And then he said, you need to have enough content to fill, 10, 12 chapters. And I did, because I've had this list that I kept, and I just call it my rules for winning. And those are things that I wanted my kids to know, but I hadn't, sending my kids an email like, hey, you should read this or see this. Um, and so I had this list and I thought, okay, I'm just going to pick each one of these topics and these will be, each one of these chapters. And then it gets, then that just got woven into the story.
Oh, that's awesome. Um, Very cool. So looking back now, so here you are launched, you actually have the first copy in your hand a year later. Um, if you hadn't written it the last year, but you had the experience you have, and I said to you today, hey, Chris, you should write a book. Or, are you writing it again today? Was it, cause what I've seen tend to happen with books is they tend to be like a labor of love, no doubt. And it's like, you don't really, most people anyways, don't write books to get rich or famous. It's because they've got something they want to share with the world. And so therefore it lends to, yeah, it was really hard most of the time, and I probably would do it again, but I'm always curious like what goes through people's mind.
Yeah. So I would do it again, but if you were asking me that today and I hadn't done it, I probably wouldn't do it. It's not that knowing what I know, it's not that I wouldn't want to. The emphasis for me doing it was I had a partner who's really been more of a mentor saying, hey, here's how you do it. And here's the recipe. And here's what we do next. And here's who we go to for this. And here's who we go to for that. So I was really lucky to met Greg and have that guidance, which is cool because now there's things that I can share with people to help other people that are interested.
That's awesome. What during the process of writing this book, what was the thing what surprised you about whether it was process or just actually writing? What surprised you that you didn't expect?
So I kept thinking and saying, this is too basic. This is too basic. It's not gonna be impactful. It's not gonna. And finally one day Greg said, like it for you and probably your friends that you hang out with, it probably is basic because this, you've lived it, you've done it, you've taught it. But for most of the world, it's not. And there's a lot of people that can really learn from it. So in December, when we had it wasn't the final draft, but one of the almost final draft, I had shared it with a coworker And she goes, yeah, I'd love to read it. So she read it, and she had very positive things to say. But the thing she said, which then caused me to think, okay, maybe this is gonna work, is she said, my son, who's about to graduate high school, is not going to go to college without reading this book. And that was really good validation. Because I although it's not a real estate book, real estate's like my world, right? It's my life. And I thought, okay, as someone who has a real estate team, has had real estate companies, I've always looked for good books that I could give those people on my team to read to help them, get to where they want to get to and where I want them to get to. And so I wrote in the back of my mind, this book was always, I was hoping it to be one of those type of books. And also something that hopefully my kids will read and then learn some of the stuff that they don't want to hear from a dad, but
Maybe
maybe from a book they might.
get them a copy like without your name on the front. It's just so they think it's just from Greg, and then then they'll read it. Maybe have the publisher make you a special jacket for the book. It's funny you say that, because I read a book recently and was kind of like blown away, and it's very simple. It's small. It's basically sit down and read it in 2 hours or less type of deal.
Yeah.
And I found myself literally handed out over 100 copies of it. And I was talking to another buddy of mine who'd written a book about 2 years ago, which I loved, and ironically probably bought 100 copies of that one too and handed it out, right? And he said, what I found is, when I was doing the research for my book, is like, when you can give somebody a book that, even though if it's a simple concept, not just to understand, but to like apply, and in this case, like a story, a parable, those are the books that sell, because people can actually take action on what they're learning, or what the story or the message of the book is. And he's like, that's something, at least for him with his publisher, was something that they really tried to do with his. And I noticed it in this other book I was telling him about. And so, as you say that about yours, and I was lucky enough to read an earlier copy of it, and I would agree. This falls in line. This is something that can easily be, I can see being gifted quite a bit to friends, coworkers, team members, things like that, because of that ability. So, just because something's, I guess I've learned this too. Just because something is simple doesn't mean it's not very important, and in a lot of ways groundbreaking for a lot of people.
Yeah. 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 I mean, some of those early books I read were, in retrospect, were probably pretty simple, but super impactful to me.
Yeah, like you probably still think about some of those lessons from some of those early books today, because they're show they for you especially too. You've had this journey of like real estate agent, number one agent in the world, real estate investor, business owner, investor, running massive companies, and so like you've really had a lot of like different iterations of your career, and you probably still look back on some of those lessons that helped you at the very early days of being a real estate agent, that help you today to be the chief real estate officer at Ojo Labs, which is not a small company.
No, it's yeah, you're absolutely right, Kevin. I mean, there's things that I read back then, and we're talking, you know, we're talking 35 years ago, that I remember perfectly and still use them and share those ideas. So yeah, I was early this morning, I was being interviewed, and the guy's pretty young. I don't know how old he is, but probably 30. And he goes, how long have you been in real estate? And I got my license in 1983. This is 2022. Next year, 2023, 1983 is 40 years. I have my real next year I will have my real estate 40 years. And he took a selfie with the two of us and sent it to me like an hour or two later. And the first thing I said to myself was, God, I look old. I was like, what? You kind of are. I was like, but I don't think I am or feel that I am. But then if I ever slow down to look in the mirror or look at a picture, I go,
Occasionally you get a reminder.
yeah.
occasionally. You know, that's so funny. I saw this meme recently where it's like, I hate that, like, in my mind, 20 years ago is like 2000, is, or I'm sorry, is 1980. Like, it
Right.
doesn't, 20 years ago to me is still 1980. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not, how is it actually 2002? Uh,
Yeah.
it's pretty wild how fast time goes, and especially too, real estate. I looked up by the time this airs, maybe a week or two after, I've had my real estate license for 15 years, which is, for me, it's wild. I mean, I remember literally teaching classes, Chris. I mean, probably right about the time I met you, or just before I met you, where I was trying to emphasize the point to other realtors that I hadn't even had a license a year yet, and I could do what I
Yeah.
was trying to teach them to do. And,
Yeah.
it's so funny, just look up and it goes quick. And then you realize like 15, 20, 30, 40 years of time's going to go by anyways. Might as well make good use of it. You definitely have. And I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. I, I do my best.
So what's new with the book? Like, does this change anything for, I know obviously, um, I know being an author is not like your full-time gig, but I mean, I asked you.
Full-time gig, you don't make money doing it, you spend money. But um, when it was done and when it showed up on Amazon and I ordered a copy for myself, that it was exciting. It was just exciting, like to have, it's like finishing any project, it always feels good, you get something across the finish line. Um, so that was cool. And people say, well, what are you gonna do? You're gonna be, you become a speaker, become a coach, you have education companies. Like, I usually have a plan for most things I do. I said, no, I'm just going to do this and I'm gonna hope people like it. And and like everything else in my life, I know if I do my best, give it all, that opportunities come and good things will happen. And that's, we'll see what transpires. But um it's funny, I hired a PR firm that will do some things over the next couple months, and the owner asked me for some testimonials from anyone I've mentored, because the book is, the story is about a mentor and a mentee, and there's just basically those two characters in the book. And so I asked three people, hey, PR company would love a testimonial, one or two sentences, and what they wrote back was like, it was like, it
Yeah.
was super touching to me. It it was, um it just made me feel really good. And not from like an ego standpoint, but from, wow, I made a difference, you
Yeah. I was
know.
gonna say, man, I know you. It's definitely not an ego standpoint. It is, it, sometimes I think too, you get doing things so much and you get doing what you do, that it's just part of who you are and what you do. And then when someone's sort of regurgitates it back to you and like they can share with you the impact it's had on them, it's like, oh, that's cool. It's kind of like the thing you're like, well, damn, I look old. You're like, you don't realize it because you're just doing what you're doing, the same thing you've been doing, right? And you're
Yeah.
still, you go out, you're super active, you exercise, like you don't behave like someone who's old. And just like the same thing as you behave like who you are. This is you, it's just what you do. And part of what you do is you give back to people, not just in real estate, but really in all arenas in business. And you help them. And it's, so it's kind of what you do. So when you hear it back, it's, I mean, it's nice. And in your case, it's real, and you deserve it, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I think what I think, we, you don't normally, like you said, slow down enough to hear those things, or you don't even, a lot of times, those things don't even get said about you till you're dead.
Yeah.
And I had this excuse or reason to ask for them now. So um now if they watch this, I'll be embarrassed. But anyways, it is a cool thing. And so, hey, if, and it's funny, Greg told me this too. He said, look, at one day someone's gonna come up to you or send you an email or message you on social media and say, man, your book really made an impact for me. He said, that's what it's all about.
Yeah. It's true. I believe him. I think you're probably gonna have that. You're gonna have that experience a lot, is my guess, over the next couple of. I don't know how long that takes for that to really hit, but my guess is you're going to experience that a lot, and that's awesome. I'm glad you did this. I'm glad you wrote. I'm glad you wrote these thoughts down and shared this book with the world. Um, anything else about the book I should have asked you, or we should kind of start to wrap up with in regards to the books?
No, I mean, like if it's my hope is, and I think it's going to be the type of book that people, and you said this earlier, that people will want to give it to people they care about, and um, and it's a short enough story where if we talk too much about it, there's not going to be anything else to read or to learn. So it's but hey, if you on the website you can read about it at dominantthoughts.com, and we give, hey, here's what's in the book, and you know, I don't know. I'm not comfortable yet talking about it, as you can probably tell. So
Well,
maybe a month or two from now, I'll be, oh yeah, and let me tell you this about the book.
so I'll link to that dominantthoughts.com. Is that the best place to go by? I know you mentioned Amazon earlier. Is that
If you click on the order on the website, it sends you straight to Amazon, so you can go either way.
okay? Cool. Awesome. So go there. We'll make sure we get those notes here or those links in the show notes. Anything else we should close with, buddy? Or before we close, I should say?
Oh, there's lots of stuff we could talk about, but
Well, you and I have a dinner coming up. We're probably
we
going
have
to
a dinner coming up, so we'll catch up about sports, music,
yeah.
um, things happening in the real estate industry that we'll keep to ourselves. And
I feel like I have so much of all of those things to talk to you about, by the way. Like, so, I mean, between our last phone call and today, like, I feel like so much has happened. I've just got so much to share and talk to you about.
yeah,
So I'm looking forward to it.
likewise.
All right.
I appreciate you having me on. I know you guys, you and Fred, do an awesome job with not only your podcast but all the things that you do on social media, and you have a lot of great interviews you do. So thanks for carving out some time for me.
I appreciate that. We enjoy doing it, and we'll do that again. So, Chris Heller, thanks a lot for being a guest again on the Kevin and Fred show. I'll see you in a couple days, and for the listeners, we'll see you guys next week.